want to consider the position in regards to trying to restore movement capabilities, because whether it be psychological stress, physical stresses, training, other behaviors, we tend to get the superficial musculature more involved. And this is where we can take somebody that is well designed to be this cylinder that can turn. We can actually take that turn away. So let's just take our narrow, slender pitcher and let's overstrength train them, which would require them to squeeze much harder to produce force. And while we might be able to increase their force production, and even performance would improve up to a certain point, we can take them past that certain point where we actually take away some of the essential qualities that they need to be able to perform their activities or sport, or somebody might start to experience pain in certain joints, or they would acquire certain diagnoses of knee pain, shoulder pain, elbow pain, back pain, because they have lost their ability to turn under those circumstances.
Welcome to Reconsider. I'm Bill Hartman. This is the podcast to challenge you to ask better questions, to look beyond traditional models of thinking and arrive at better health and fitness solutions.
About breathing stuff we talked about so far was a lot of the mechanics in the first episode, and then second episode was more, we dove into nasal breathing, belly breathing, and then we ended up talking about an exercise. We talked about hook lying and using that as a way to start to feel the things. But
right.
The next part, I think what we wanted to get into was talking about how breathing is different for wide and narrow structurally, and then positional breathing and how we can utilize laying, prone or face down, laying face up, laying on your side, going up on your elbows or hands and quadruped, or even like seated and standing, how we can adjust things.
Yeah, because the volume, the positions are going to determine what direction the compression is, what direction the volume goes, etc. But
Sure.
if we look at this from a structural perspective, and we have to talk about the two extremes, that's the thing we want to make very, very clear. So we're going to take 8 billion people, we're going to compare them 2 by 2, and we're going to find somebody that has what we would represent as the widest structure, and then somebody that would have the narrowest of structure. And so we're talking about the two people in comparison, because the physical structure is going to determine what your bias is. So one is actually going to be a person that's more predisposed to being a better exhaler. One is going to be predisposed towards someone that's going to be a better inhaler, generally speaking. And so the bias in structure of somebody that would be the tall and narrow individual is actually somebody that would be predisposed to think about like twisting someone, like twisting a towel, and it gets narrower. And so this person would actually be biased towards taking a breath in to maintain a certain degree of expansion, which allows you to move more freely. Whereas we had somebody that would be the opposing structure that is actually expanded sideways. They actually need to squeeze themselves in just a little bit so they can move a little bit more freely. And so that's why we have these opposing strategies. And so the person that would be expanded sideways would be biased towards a little bit more of an exhalation. And so again, that right away makes the influence of structure quite important in regards to what you are capable of doing well. And so we would see your taller, slender folk that maintain a little bit of a bias towards inhalation, they actually turn and twist actually a little bit better than other people do. Our person that is a little bit wider in structure, not as good a turner, but also very good at squeezing. So they are your big force producers. So if we were to use like an example, like a couple of extreme examples from the sporting world, if you think about, so Randy Johnson was a baseball pitcher, and I believe he was about 6'11". Really good example of a taller, slender individual with great turning capabilities as a baseball pitcher. Then you take your typical offensive lineman in American football, who tends to have a much broader, wider structure and very well designed not to turn, because in American football, if I have an offensive lineman that gets turned easily, they end up having a quarterback that gets very angry with them, because if an offensive lineman gets turned, that means the defense got past them. And then the quarterback is laying on his back counting how many lights there are in the stadium lights, because he's looking up at the sky way too often. So again, that sort of lends us, like I said, to being predisposed by physical structure. And you'll see this, like, and the Olympics are always the great example of structure, because there are definite biases that we would see. So for instance, a high jumper and a shot putter would have two totally different structures. And again, the way that they produce movement and their ability to bend and twist is totally different because of that.
See if this resonates with you. You want to get back to the gym and get in shape. Maybe get back to playing golf or your favorite sport, or get out and go for a run. Maybe you just want to move and feel better. But every time you restart, that old ache or strain rears its ugly head and interrupts your comeback. When I wrote All Gain, No Pain for my patients who had completed their physical therapy, we knew what they were ready for. You're in a different space with a different starting point than before. You don't feel like a physical therapy patient, so you're going to need to approach this differently. With some guidance, you'll first need to reconstruct your movement foundation that takes your physical structure into consideration. You're going to have ongoing questions as you think differently, so you're going to need a like-minded, supportive community to support your progression. If you're ready to begin your reconstruction, we have a new group starting soon. Send an email to reconyourself@gmail.com to start your process.
Right. And then thinking about it from, if we were to take two cylinders, and then one is going to be a little rounder of a cylinder and narrow of a cylinder, if I was to put that on a slant, it would roll pretty easily down the hill.
Correct.
And then if we're talking about the wider structure, is still going to be cylindrical, but it might be a little more oblong, so more of like an oval shape to it.
Correct.
It'll still roll down the hill, but it'll kind of like flop its way down.
It's almost like trying to roll a refrigerator downhill.
Yeah, so it will get there if you give it enough.
Yeah, but that's why I will often refer to those people as refrigerator turns, because it's kind of what it looks like.
Right. And then, with as we've talked about before, with external compression and tasks and environments, both structures can become flat turners.
Correct. And so this is one of those situations where we do want to consider the position in regards to trying to restore movement capabilities, because whether it be psychological stress, physical stresses, training, other behaviors, we tend to get the superficial musculature more involved. And this is where we can take somebody that is well designed to be this cylinder that can turn. We can actually take that turn away. So let's just take our narrow, slender pitcher and let's overstrength train them, which would require them to squeeze much harder to produce force. And while we might be able to increase their force production, and even performance would improve up to a certain point, we can take them past that certain point where we actually take away some of the essential qualities that they need to be able to perform their activities or sport, or somebody might start to experience pain in certain joints, or they would acquire certain diagnoses of knee pain, shoulder pain, elbow pain, back pain, because they have lost their ability to turn under those circumstances.
Yeah. And I think in the future, I think we're definitely going to talk, because that's a topic that we might gloss over a bit, but it's very important, is that certain exercises for certain structures are not appropriate. So then you end up saying like, okay, well, your narrow golfer or thrower might not be beneficial for them to be trap bar deadlifting year round or doing back squats, just because of like what you're saying, the imposed forces from doing that activity might actually rob your ability to turn.
Yeah. So we have to understand what the trade-offs are, right? If we take, and again, we take somebody that's narrow and slender, we say we need them to be stronger, aka produce more force. And so we use activities that are typically designed and well designed for that. But we got to be careful with how much of that we would utilize, because we can take away, again, if I need to produce more force, I might have to give up something else to do that. And then those are the decisions that we have to make. But let's go back to the positional stuff now. and talk about that. So let's go ahead and use this narrow person that we were talking about. Okay. And let's just say that we would never do this, Chris. We would never have somebody that we would accidentally take away their ability to turn. But let's just say that they trained with somebody else. And so they're very, very squished, and they get squished front to back. So they get spread out sideways. And so that makes our slender turning person that would roll down the hill, flip and flop down the hill, like at the refrigerator that we were talking about before. So it would behoove us to actually select activities to sort of re-expand them front to back and actually restore this cylindrical representation. So it stands to reason we take somebody that's kind of smashed front to back, so they're spread out sideways, and then we turn them and we put them on their side. There's an advantage immediately to putting someone like that on their side to promote improved movement, because what you have to appreciate is that you're a big bag of water, okay? Not to be insulting, we just are. So if I take this person that's kind of smashed front to back, I put them on their side. As soon as I lay you on your side, the fluid volume of your body, so, and let's just think internal organs for right now, will fall towards the surface that you're laying on because of gravity, obviously. Well, that force pushes down into that side and actually creates an expansion front to back on the downside. That's very advantageous from a positional standpoint. So, excuse me. So that encourages the AP diameter to improve right then and there. I superimpose a breath on top of that in that position. I have now gained further expansion front to back. We also have to consider the fact that while we don't think about this too much, air is a fluid, okay? And it's going to respond to gravity as well. Not to the same degree that we would see with something denser like water, but it does get influenced by gravity. So as we breathe in, the airflow fills from the bottom up, whatever the bottom would be relative to gravity. And so as we breathe in, we are expanding that downside to a much greater degree as this lung fills up. There's also less resistance to the sort of recoil of the thorax under that circumstance. So very advantageous for us to put somebody on their side when they're squished front to back. So somebody that would lose their turns, which might show up as some sort of ache or pain in a joint that has to turn. Okay.
Yeah. So we're talking about the either extreme structure when whatever task or whatever behavior that they need to be able to perform that's compressed them from front to back, so that eventually, I think it's a good thing to reiterate that when you keep going down this path of compensation and your body keeps finding different ways to keep you moving forward through space or performing whatever task you need to be able to do every day, say it's yard work or some type of manual labor or sitting at a desk, there's these paths of least resistance that you'll take, and there's these typical layers of compression that will keep being added upon your body until we get to a point where both structures end up sort of looking the same with that compression from front to back.
Correct.
And if you weren't really to know the rules or know where either of them came from, you might treat both people the same, and that would be a big mistake. And that's kind of what we're trying to explain when we're talking about the variation in the structure. So we might take a narrow individual who's compressed, put them on their side in order to get that front to back expansion again, like you were saying. And we also might take a wide individual and put them on their side to get that front to back representation. But as we start to peel back the layers of their compensation, that's when it's going to start to vary.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe we should take a few steps back, and we should talk about, because people, other than people just taking our word for it, that there are two different types of extremes to the structure, what can we tell them as like how the body develops from maybe even all the way back from embryological, like when a child develops, that makes one person, I know you had mentioned twisting the towel, that might be helpful to talk about just from bones and skeleton and embryos. Why do we end up with a narrower version archetype and a wider version of the structure?
You mean because it's the parents that you picked and the way that they mix together makes it?
Yeah, but as you develop, I mean, other than just like what what the DNA would allow it to create, what differences are happening as that embryo develops into a narrower or a wider individual.
Honestly, there's like you're not going to change who you are. Like mom and dad kind of decided what you will be. And so we are designed on diagonals and helices is essentially what we're created by. Reason being because if you're not designed that way, the great representation is looking at the old garden hoses versus the current garden hoses. So the old garden hoses were designed with straight lines, and so they would kink and bend, and it affects the ability for the fluid to actually flow through your body. We are designed on helices, which allows us to bend and twist and utilize the energy that's actually stored in the bends and twists to allow us to move very easily. And so humans don't kink, right? When we bend, right? We bend actually very smoothly under those circumstances, but because of the parents that we chose and the way that all these genes mix together, we'll have helices that are a little bit more vertical or helices that are a little bit more horizontal. And so that's going to determine. So if I have helices that are more vertical, that makes me a taller, slender looking individual. If I have helices that are a little bit more horizontal, that provides me this expanded into the wider physical structure. Both have benefits, both have detriments as far as like what they can ultimately do from a performance standpoint, but that's essentially why there's a difference and why we would see these differences arise in movement behaviors and capabilities.
Yeah, and I think it's sort of the genetic cards that you're dealt. Like that's the deck that you have to play with, and you're never really. And it's unrealistic. So a lot of times people are being told that they can look like whoever. So they want to look like Kate Blanchett, or they want to in this movie, or they want to look like Benicio del Toro in this movie, or whatever it might be, and they hand you a picture.
Interesting choices on your part.
Well, yeah, I've met both of them, so I don't know.
Okay. Well, there you go. Okay.
So,
for those of you watching this far into the video, please list your favorite actor in the comments. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, Bruce Willis.
Yeah, so
Bruce Willis, the greatest.
That's
actor.
your favorite actor of all time.
Greatest actor of our time.
Interesting.
Kurt Russell, number 2.
Who's my favorite actor?
Kurt Russell's number 2. Billy Crudup is up there though. I like Billy.
Yeah,
Crudup.
Billy. I also know Billy.
Yeah, I like Billy Crudup a lot. But Bruce
Billy
Willis, hands down, Bruce Willis.
Yeah. This is going to take me a while to think of, so I'm not.
You have too many because you've actually met these people. It's like
yeah. It's true.
I watch from afar. I just choose that way. I don't know the person.
So yeah, anyways, so the thing I end up telling these people, especially when they come to me and they're like, I want to look like this person, I tell them the realistic way to think about it is think about everyone in your extended family. Who are the most athletic people in your family? Like, you have an uncle who runs triathlons, or do you have a brother who, or another aunt or uncle that used to be a thrower in college? And everyone in your family seems to be a little more like wider, stout individuals. Like, you are going to look like the most in shape and fit version of those people. And that will typically be the truth, because like in my family, we all tend to be pretty narrow and lanky and tall for, and it's in the people in my family are relatively soft. Like they're not very muscular and low body fat percentage. So the best I'm going to get is if I work really hard, I can probably get to 10% body fat and not really have abs. But that's just, I just understand that just based on the rest of the people in my family.
Yeah. And again, we look at this, like the closer you get to an extreme, the more predisposed to certain things that, good or bad, that it's going to determine. It's like, if you're a tall, slender individual, and again, look at the sporting world. It's like, okay, maybe you're going to play tennis, or you're going to throw a baseball, you're going to do things that are more rotational than force producing, right? Maybe you're still fast by relative terms, but you might not be the fastest guy, right? Because the fastest guy is going to have another element of structure that is superimposed upon that allows him to do things at a much higher force in a much shorter period of time. Therefore, you are faster. But again, but people tend to gravitate towards the things that they're good at, and so your physical structure sort of leads you in that direction.
Yeah. So let's say we gave the example of putting someone on their side who's compressed to allow them to get front to back expansion. Let's say we've restored that ability to get that front to back expansion. What are then, as we start to diverge into the wide realm and the narrow realm, what are both of these types of people going to be better at doing, and what are the positions that I'm actually going to want to put each group into in order to continue this delayering of compensation?
Okay, so we can go back to this helical representation that will be helpful for someone from a vertical versus a horizontal representation. So again, we have a helix that would be sort of crisscross, and more of a vertical representation, one that would be more horizontal. And so then we think about bases of support. So the base of support is where your feet land on the ground and where you move optimally within that space between your feet. So our narrow people will have a narrower stance, but they will have more of like a front to back representation where they move really, really well. Whereas the wider folk will be spread out literally from side to side. Now they will still have a forward and a back, but it's going to be further away from the center of their body, and probably not as extreme front to back. So they're going to benefit from activities that are in these wider bases, where the taller, slender folk are going to be a little bit more front to back and not quite as far apart. And again, it just stands to reason. It just fits into their profile. And it doesn't mean you can never do either or. It's just, what are you going to be better at versus something that might be a little bit more physically challenging, something that may demand a more compensatory type of an activity, which again, it's not that we never move into these compensatory strategies. It's just that we have to understand what happens under those circumstances. This is where we start to lose movement capabilities. This is where we start to potentially absorb more of the load through structure. And again, this is how when we work with people, especially people that have had, history of therapies or rehab, or however we want to look at that, it's like we have to take these structural elements into consideration, because we want to emphasize and optimize their capabilities. We don't want to start pushing them into strategies that would be less than optimal for their physical structures.
Right. So that's going to lead into, so give us an opportunity to talk about the sponsor of this podcast, which is RECON. Program designed for your body structure. And this is where, a little icon will pop up. So I don't know, I think it was 2 episodes ago, we had talked about how Bill and I created a program called RECON that's based on what your structure is and what your goals are, so that we don't just give everyone a generalized fitness program that, if done by everyone with a certain intensity, might just end up compressing the bejesus out of everybody. So instead, you sign up, answer a questionnaire based on what your goal is. Either you want to get back to movement, you want to get back to playing sports, you want to get back to just training again in the gym. We lay out a plan to kind of learn how to recapture movements and get these sort of compressions to subside. And then it's all based in an app and it has a community aspect to it. So if you're interested in that, I'll put a little video of what the app actually looks like, because we had some people asking us questions. But since the last time we talked about it, we've got a whole bunch of people signing up that are liking it already. And if you're interested, go ahead and email us at reconyourself@gmail.com, and then put in the subject line that you're interested in the RECON program. And we'll send you some information and get you set up so that you can try it yourself. Yeah, that's our advertisement for the
that
podcast.
Was well done. That was very impressive.
Well, it's like I've been working on this for the last 6 months. But yeah, so if you have questions or you want to know more, just shoot us an email. Yeah. And then if you want to see what the program looks like I said, I just included, if future me is a good enough producer, he included the video of what the program looks like. So, okay. talking to my future
We got
self.
some positions. We want to talk about a couple of more positions.
Yeah, I wanted to talk specifically about, so I'm going to try to keep reiterating what you're saying, or maybe rephrase it in a way. So you're talking about the wider base of support being the for the wider individuals. So if you imagine my feet have more space to move this way, a narrow individual has more space to move front to back. So that's going to change the positions that you're going to want to use with these people for positional breathing and movement related stuff, and for how you program like different types of squatting, different types of pressing, different types of pulling, whatever you want to consider.
Yeah. It's like, so here you go, real quick. And then we want to talk about like maybe another position in regards to some of the breath stuff, since this is a breathing related episode.
Sure.
Your wider, the wider person that has the more horizontal design is going to be a really good deadlifter, generally speaking. The person that has a more vertical design is going to be a much better squatter in comparison to a deadlifter. So that's like, if you ever wondered, like, why am I really good at this and not really good at this? These are some of the structural elements, and there's some crossover between the two. There are people that would appear to be good squatters regardless of their design, but again, we're speaking generally at the extremes. This will be representative of why certain activities maybe have been uncomfortable for you in the past, or been problematic for you in the past. It's because you're trying to do something against your physical structure.
Yeah. And that there's going to be people listening that are going to go, hey, Bill, I'm a narrow guy and I love deadlifting.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
It's like, well, yeah, if you have really long arms and you practice deadlifting enough, you will eventually compress yourself enough to be good at deadlifting.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
But you're sort of going against what nature might have intended for you.
Like I said, we have to look at the extremes, and again, there's always a few exceptions. Like I'm willing to accept that, but we're speaking.
Right. So we're getting kind of into our time here. So I want to try to grab a couple of examples. Maybe we talk about why like a hip bridge is a better, like a hip lift or a hip bridge is a better version of a position for a wide versus like quadruped being a better position for a narrow.
Well, this just has to do with, and we think about this internally, like where these compressions will tend to arise to a much greater degree. Right. So if we think about like one side versus the other, so front versus back, we'll have certain people that are predisposed to have a greater strategy. Like when we're talking about superficial muscles here that are contributing to performance or movements or whatever that can interfere with the ability to move air around. We'll see a tendency for the taller, slender person to first get the pressure from the superficial muscle on the front side of their body. So we would move them towards something that would be where they would be more prone. So the front of your body would face the floor more often under those circumstances. We would use supportive postures, whether it be laying on your belly, propped up on your elbows, or propped up on your elbows and your knees, or on your hands and knees, because that's going to allow and promote the expansion on that side. Whereas if we were taking somebody that would be more predisposed to this wider structure, we're going to see a lot more pressure from the backside first. We want to put that side down because again, we're taking advantage of the gravitational influence and what it does to you internally to promote the ability to expand in those directions. And so we might see something show up in a little bit more. And again, I tend to not use I don't want people to think that glute bridges are the solution under this.
Right. It's an example. Yeah.
Right. It's a positional influence that we're talking about. We're not talking about driving more muscles. We're not talking about a weakness. Like people say, oh, I have weak glutes. Like that's like the standard thing across the board that you're going to see promoted on any YouTube channel that, oh, weak glutes, weak, whatever. Something. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a position that actually
gluteal amnesia.
Gluteal amnesia. Yeah, my
they forgot their identity.
They forgot how to work. Right. Yeah. But what we're talking about here is we're talking about positions that would predispose you to greater success in promoting an expansion in a different area.
In relation to
Really
gravity.
by design.
Yeah.
And
So we're using, so it's, I think it's helpful to, so we had said the end result of when you're going to see the physical therapist or when you need to talk to a trainer or a coach, the end result is probably going to look similar for narrows and wides just based on all of the compressions that are there. The road to get to that end, we call it what we would call end game, is different though. So as we sort of peel back the layers, we start to lose these compressions, just knowing where, and what you had mentioned about like where the compressions tend to start is important. And it also, I think a good way to think about it is like where the body tends to trap air and fluid for either individual, and then using gravity to help alleviate that compression. Because in a gravity field, my only option is to expand. So that's the bias that's created when I stand in a gravity field. So if I'm face down as a narrow and I have this sort of trapped, compressed front, and I want that to open up, I let it hang into gravity. And if I'm compressed in the back side like a wide, and I flip backwards, so a hip bridge or a glute bridge, my back is off the ground, so that area can then expand and sort of give way to gravity in that case without having sort of any extra compression there. So that's really why we use those two examples.
Exactly.
So we talked a little bit about why face down would be helpful for narrows, why face up would be helpful for wides, and we talked about why laying on your side would be useful for anyone with high levels of compression, just to try to get that expansion from front to back. So I think that's the basics of what we wanted to cover in this episode, was just about the positional breathing and the reasons why we would use different positions. But it can get a little bit confusing. So it's part of the reason that you and I have jobs, and that part of the reason why like programs that we're creating it exists now. I don't think anyone's really I anything like this yet, trying to, maybe they think they're doing that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I just don't pay enough attention to anything else. So.
Right. Well, you're just part of the benefit of you just being so bad with technology is that even if you wanted to pay attention to all these things, you wouldn't really be able to.
I still couldn't do it.
Because you're just like looking through your.
This is the peak.
This is my Bill. This is my Bill impression. And then be like, wait, where's the button? Where's the button for
it? Chris, if I had feelings, it would be hurt right now.
You'd reach through that computer screen and punch me in the face. We had somebody sign up for the program.
We're probably going to need like a part 4 of this, aren't we? At some point?
Probably. I mean, I think I think next episode I want to talk about good exercises versus bad exercises, because I had mentioned it earlier, for one of the other businesses I run, we had talked about back squatting having some negative consequences for throwers and rotational athletes, and people got very upset, as you would expect, because they don't like. People don't like being told that things that they like to do might not be the best thing for them.
The one thing that is the greatest difficulty for people to accept is that the thing that they want to be the solution might not be the solution.
Yeah.
No matter what they've been told or what they've heard, because they just don't understand what all the possibilities are. The broader your understanding of what can happen under any number of circumstances, the better your trade-off will be. Trade-off. Very few solutions, mostly trade-offs. And so that's the thing, that's what we want to talk about. It's like there's no exercise necessarily that's inherently good or bad. We just have to take into consider who's doing it, when are they doing it, how much are they doing it, and then what are all the possibilities. We have to think about what is the primary effect, but what are the secondary and tertiary and ongoing consequences of this. right? At one point in time, it might be the perfect exercise for you. At another point in time, it might be the exact opposite of what you're trying to achieve. That's what
Right.
we have to talk about next time.
And that'll be next time, folks.
Awesome.
Finger guns.
Don't do the, don't do that.
Don't touch, what did they used to say? Don't touch that dial.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Reconsider is sponsored by Substance Nutrition. Go to substancenutrition.com. Get your Neuro Coffee, better brain, and Synthesis, better protein, better body. Enter the coupon code RECON, RECON, and get free shipping on all of your orders.